Hi, this is Roger. No, this isn't a live broadcast, but it's a repeat of basically what I tried to do yesterday in the live broadcast. It dawned on me today, quite a few of the plants that we looked at yesterday and didn't see because of the foreshortened screen due to the settings problem, which has now been fixed. The plants that we were looking at didn't get put back in their proper place due to a relatively high degree of annoyance factor. I'll leave it at the polite version. But as they're still around and easily accessible, and they were requested plants to look at, you know, it might be a while before I pluck up the nerve to do another live broadcast, because gremlins seem to have moved in. And at the moment I don't know where they're hiding, so I thought, well, as those plants are readily accessible, I'll just repeat the video but as a normal video. That way if anything goes wrong I can fix it as I go along, but things don't tend to go wrong. The only thing that can go wrong now is my big long-term battery, 300 minutes worth, is on charge because it ran completely flat. So I've got one of my little batteries in. It is possible that could run out during this. In which case it'll just stop. The only other thing that can go wrong is I knock the tripod over because it's right on its diddy little thin legs to get the height. But apart from that, as long as I don't touch the tripod, we should be okay. So we started off looking at two twinkles requested, yeah. And so I do need to remember where the camera is. This is the cinnamon twinkle. This is growing nicely. I've got no problems with this. All the spikes are currently in bloom. I don't see any more buds to open. So we've probably got another couple of weeks worth there. But this one hasn't long been repotted, so it can stay where it is. And once it starts pushing out the next lot of new growths, it's going to totally fill that pot. But that set of growth and the next set of blooms can stay in that pot because it hasn't been in there that long, so the media is not going to break down. So that's the cinnamon twinkle that was requested. So I'm going to do these as I'm getting at them, simply because I can just put them back where I got them from. This once was a giant brassica and it was a beauty. It was on a mount and unfortunately it grew so vigorously it headed off away from the mount, and it was a very heavy plant. It was starting to pull itself off the mount and all the roots were aerial. Now I repotted this on video a while back. And all I had left, basically, that was worth keeping was an old leafless back bulb, one that's starting to desiccate, whatever you want to say, and a leaf that's going over soon, and a tiny little new growth. Well, the tiny little new growth is now pushing on. And at the time we potted that, it had little nubbins around the base, which is the basis of the start of the new root system. Now I'm not going to hook that moss out and check because I don't want to disturb that area one little bit. But I'm confident that the roots are growing on that new growth. Once it gets that root system going, that new growth will take off and it should be followed by more. And again, recently repotted, it can stay in that pot until it's hanging over the edges. That's Brassica Chieftain Ludlows, that one. You can see these are readily accessible because I'd got them out ready for yesterday and they're still out. This is my other Neophonetia. We had a look at the one that got mounted because it fell apart as I tried to repot it. This one got potted up in the more traditional manner. This is a nice variegated leaf one. So inside of this moss mound is one of those tiny little plastic mesh pots, upside down, covered in moss, plant plonked on the top, roots spread over the moss mound and more moss spread around the outside. That dries very fast because it's hollow. And in the bottom of this clay pot are rocks. That's it. And that's to hold it still and upright and not fall over, because as you can see it's a bit sticky up in the air. So that's that one. It's not going to be growing much now because it's effectively semi-dormant. So it doesn't get much water, nice and cool, bright light, and once the growing season starts and we get some warmth in here, it should start growing quite quickly. Well, that's the plan anyway. So that's the little Neophonetia. This is the more traditional Japanese style. At the next show that I go to, if the guy's there, we have a potter that comes along and does potting demonstrations. He makes the proper Neophonetia glazed pots, you know, with the slits down the side and the great big hole in the bottom. And looking at the prices on the internet, his are ridiculously cheap in comparison. So if I see a nice one that I like the colour of, I'll probably get one and sit that in a proper looking pot just to set it off. But yeah, that's that one. Ugh. Getting there, we'll be on to the big stuff soon, which was part of what yesterday's was supposed to be all about. Somebody asked if the yellow twinkle was fully open. No, not yet, so I'll have to get back a bit to get the whole plant in. Got some spikes that are fully open, and even the odd bloom here that's starting to go over. So I've got 3 spikes fully out, and I've got 3 spikes still to open. So it should be in bloom quite a while now. Again, not long repotted, and it's got room to move in that pot. That's a relatively wide, shallow pot, so it can stay in there until the media breaks down, quite honestly, which will be a while. So that's got plenty of room to grow on. Looking nice at the moment. The other one that I forgot to get down yesterday, I'll do now because it's under my nose. Somebody said, could you show the mounted twinkle on the grounds that what do I really see the difference in the style, i.e. the difference between a pot and a mount. Quite honestly, virtually any epiphyte can be mounted. That's how they grow. They hang on trees. So this is much more natural than sticking them in a pot. The difference is what their roots are in. Now obviously on a mount they're possibly in nothing at all, heading up towards some moss. That's what happens. And a lot of our epiphytic orchids do grow on mossy trees, so having some moss around the base is not unnatural. The difference is the moss they get is live, and the moss we get isn't necessarily. Your difference between a potted one, those 2 potted twinkles at the moment are getting watered every 7 or 8 days. This is still getting watered every 2 or 3 days. In the summer, those pots will go to about every 3 days, 4 days, depending on the temperatures. This one will be every single day without fail when it's warm. So that's your difference really, is your workload. And if you have a lot of mounts, you need to be prepared to put in that workload in that warmer, drier weather, because they're going to need a lot of hydration. Oh, fragrance on that is gorgeous. So that's the little mounted twinkle. I would say they're all growing equally well, but this one's more work. But it looks nice. It looks nice and natural with the blooms arching out. Yeah, I like mounted orchids, but I'm prepared to put the work in. And I'm here almost every day, or at least for, I would say I'm here for part of virtually every day. So I'm here, I can do the work, not everybody can. I'll just quickly get that down because that wasn't there yesterday. The little orange Vanda is just starting to open. Yay! Now that's not a very good spike for this Vanda. It normally has more tightly clustered blooms, but the colours on this one don't look that good when the blooms open. They look better as they get older. But anyway, that's just literally opened since yesterday. On its way to a nice looking spike. And talking of things that are open today that weren't open yesterday, so I'm adding bits in here. What about that then? It's not so much what it looks like, it's the size of the thing. That is by far my largest Paphiopedilum bloom, and I like it a lot. I don't know how much the camera can pick up, and I don't know how close I can get before it goes out of focus, but you might be able to see the leaves, these what I call the wings. They're hairy all along the edges. They've got like little warty bits with hairs sticking up. It's an incredibly attractive bloom. I really like that one. I just wish it would do it more often and a bit quicker. Anyway, that is Paphiopedilum Magical Venus. And I'm sure somebody will look it up and find the parents and take great delight in telling me. And am I bothered? Any more little ones from yesterday? I don't think there was. Or somebody said, has any more blooms opened on the Dendrobium moniliform? Well, quick answer, yes, quite a few. And there's still some to come. That I can quite safely say on this plant is the best it's ever bloomed. That's quite a lot of blooms in one go. They don't last that long, so if they come out staggered, you end up, well, in past instances I've ended up with 1, 2 or 3 at once. So this time it's managed to get quite a few out together. So that's looking nice at the moment. Last about another 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then they'll be gone. There was no other little stuff yesterday. So the whole purpose of yesterday was the big stuff. And unlike yesterday, I'm not that prepared today, but the reason for doing this today is twofold. One, because I felt a bit that I'd let people down yesterday, so it's a bit of sort of making up for that. But in addition to that, it's dawned on me this morning, now I'm back to what I would call a normal working day, that most of the long cane dendrobiums that I got down are probably due a dribble of water. Well, if I'm going to do all the trouble of getting them down to look at, well, I'm not putting them back without watering them, so I've got some water ready just in case. I'm not saying they will get watered, but they're due to be looked at. And you can, well, I can chat through the looking at process, that'll be interesting. Every time I get out here in this mode, I get asked about the big bush. Now this was hand selected for me. I was offered the service. I'm going to a nursery, this is one of the European ones, I forget, possibly Germany, to get some plants. Do you want me to get some for you? And I'll hand pick them and I'll post them to you at a much more reasonable rate than the nursery would do. Did I say yes? No. I actually said hell yes to get hand-picked orchids. But this is Dendrobium hancockii. Grows like a bamboo bush, so it puts up long canes that then arch over and branch all over the place. Eventually it becomes deciduous, and I've just noticed right under my nose is a bud. Whether I'm going to be able to single that out, it's just under my it's just under my finger, just under the bend in that cane. There's a little tiny bud showing. I don't know whether you can see it. So we are going to have some blooms. It did bloom last year. It had a trickle. No mass blooming or anything, but I wasn't expecting to see any buds on this just yet. Oh, there's another one there. That's 2. Oh, now I'm going to look. 3. Any big ones, so that I can show you what a bigger bud looks like. Because these buds take a while to grow. They start off as a little wispy thing, and then gradually oh, there's several. Yeah, okay, we have buds. Yippee! And we have new roots pushing out in places. It grew these through 3 canes last year, which are clustered together. I tied them in because I didn't want them arching too early. Yeah, so the idea is to keep it quite upright and then let it arch away from that height and not get any taller. You listening? Otherwise I'll have nowhere to put it. So that's Dendrobium hancockii, one of the bigger ones, known as the big bush. Oops, so it's treading on the tray. That is the problem when you squash for space. That needs to go out of the way because that's recently been mounted and certainly doesn't need looking at again, but it's in the way, so that can go up there for now. Next on the list is, it's basically this row here that are all big stuff. These are all long cane dendrobiums in some shape or form, half of which are resting at the moment, and they just stay up there. They won't be coming down to look at for some time, so I'll take advantage of watering them while they're down. This is a nice sized plant. Not too big, but then still a good size. And you notice, despite the plant taking up a lot of space, it doesn't need a big mount. This plant has always grown and bloomed well without having a big mount. It never produces a massive root system. It never has, But we had to take this off the mount. The piece of bark it was on was actually rotting and starting to decay, and the moss had been on there a long time, so I had to unmount it and redo it again, at which point quite a lot of the roots got ripped because they were well attached, and there weren't many. But since then it's now pushed on a very nice root system. Yeah, so it's replaced its root system. You've got a kiki right in your face. This is Dendrobium hercoglossum, and I can see at least 3 large kikis on here ready to come off. So there's some more for somebody else. I've already got 2 potfuls of this to go to somebody else when the weather gets better. But before you jump out and say I'll have that, because the blooms are beautiful, just have a look at, that's what it does, you know, if it's growing reasonably well. And this pushes on. Canes at the start of the season grow upwards, yeah? They carry on growing through the winter, slower, but they don't stop, they carry on growing. And then the following year, they carry on growing again. So they have 2 complete growing seasons, and during that second season, these canes will get heavy enough to become pendulous, and then the new ones will come out the top. So it always moves downwards, slowly but surely, and eventually it does become totally deciduous. I don't take the deciduous canes off immediately, because it still manages to push some blooms out every now and again. But like a lot of these types of dendrobiums, they bloom on the node opposite a leaf. The leaves are alternate, yeah, one each side, and the bloom spikes come out the opposite to where a leaf is. Once that node's bloomed, it'll never bloom again. But it will bloom on the ones it missed out last time round. So don't be too hasty to take your canes off on some of these. That's growing nicely. I was going to say I'm looking for buds, I don't know why, it's not this. This is a later bloomer, it's not a late winter, early spring, it's more a later on in the spring. So that one's coming on nicely, that one does well. And because I need to now get it out of the way, I think I remember somebody asked about the Rhynchostylus that went in the lava rock. And are there any changes? Well, yes, actually. Since this has been in the lava rock, the roots get hydrated for longer when they're watered. And, excuse me, the greens have definitely darkened up a bit. The leaves have definitely got a darker green look to them. Their stripiness is natural. Their blotchiness, like this round here, is not natural. One of them's got a new leaf coming, just starting. And if you don't start growing nicely, and don't at least one of you bloom this year, I'm not keeping you, because I've had this hanging around for a very long time. It doesn't do well for me. So maybe it'll do better for somebody else. And if I do send it to somebody else, it's not going with the lava rock in the basket, it weighs a ton. So that's Rhynchostylus gigantea. It gets called other things, I must admit, but that's that one. Was there anything else? Somebody asked about hibiki, but that's a project plant. All the project plants that we did a while back will come round to a second look soon, towards the end of January. So I can leave that one out, that'll come round again quite soon. Now this is Dendrobium glomeratum. Let's get away from the camera so you can see the whole size. So the top of the plant's just here, yeah, and the bottom of the plant's down near my waist. That's not an exceptionally large long cane dendrobium. This was nearly lost because some idiot tried to do a winter rest on it when it shouldn't have one. I just got it wrong, and in my head it was just wrong. And it was also the winter that I tried doing the rest up in the cool bedroom where they lost their humidity, and I lost some plants. And this one was nearly one of them. But it just about managed to hang in there. And this was last year's growth. I've strapped this one because it was sticking out at right angles and taking up too much space. So I just clipped it down here to make sure it stays pendulous. If it's going to bloom, this will be the cane it blooms on. But the fact that this one hasn't, it might even bloom on that one. It won't on these are too old. These are probably 3-4 years old now. But it has started a nice new cane at the top, and with that new cane is a whole new root system starting. Yeah, because although it's got roots attached, it hasn't got that many. There's more around this side than anywhere else. Yeah, but that's not a huge root system, but it's starting new roots and a new growth. And because it's starting, well, it started a while back now, that's got a full growing season this time round without being disturbed in any shape or form and without being rested and starved. So I've got a feeling that's going to, by the end of this year, I think that's going to be quite a long cane. Gorgeous blooms on that, if I can ever get it to do it again. And if I didn't say, that's Dendrobium glomeratum. Now this one has got a problem. You wouldn't think it, but it has. It's a technicality. This is, you've heard me talk about the orchids from the big box. This is the reason the box was so big. Yeah? It's a very long dendrobium. And it was not that happy when it came out of the box. It didn't have very good roots, and it had what looked like signs of cold damage. These old canes down here, I don't know how old they are because I haven't had the plant long enough. So potentially there's some blooming down there. But what it did do after it was mounted, I think I got this in, this came in the big freeze, so that must have been February, early March time. It chucked out all that new growth in one single season. But what it did it with, goodness only knows, because it didn't have a root system in effect. Well, the roots it had were just not worth mentioning, considering that amount of growth. So the chances are it got a lot of its energy out of those old canes, and yet they're not totally shriveled, so it managed it. The problem with not having the root system is nearly all of these canes have stalled. They've lost their growing tip, so they're not going to get any longer, and if they don't get any longer, they're not going to do that and become long and pendulous. They're going to remain sticking out. But it is now, if I can get up in under there, if you can see, there's a mass of new roots coming on round here, and they're pushing, I can see them all up in behind the moss. So in behind that plant is now a pretty good root system for this year. I don't hold out a lot of hope for last year's new growths because they've stopped growing. But hopefully this year's new growths, with a root system, fed and watered well and all that, should get to their full length. And who knows, maybe these will bloom, even though they're not full-sized. Sometimes the size of the canes is not an indication of whether or not it will bloom. It just means the amount that there is to bloom on. If you've got a 3-foot cane that blooms the whole length and another cane that's only 1 foot long, you can't get as many blooms, can you? Doesn't mean it won't bloom though. So that's Dendrobium chryseum. Nearly every one of these has got, oh, that one has actually got a tag. Oh. And speak with forked tongue. It still doesn't change it, it's still Dendrobium chryseum. So that is endearingly why the box was so big, it was to get that in it. Well, that's not a resting type, that's just a drier in winter type, as was the glomeratum and the hercoglossum, as is this one. Now this came out of the big box looking very, very sorry for itself. It had a long cane with what looked like incredibly bad cold damage on it. But it was nowhere near as dead as it looked, because it pushed out 2 kikis, which I took off and planted, and it's now pushed out a new growth from the base, and it has now produced an extensive root system on that mount. So that's ready to go this year. This new growth that it pushed out isn't going to grow anymore, terminal leaf again, yeah? But at least it's there, and there are some leaves, more energy into the plant. I think this year's growths could actually take off a bit. Whether I see any blooms on that, I haven't got a clue. And this is an odd one, because this is mainly found as a lithophyte, and it's found on limestone rocky areas. That doesn't necessarily lend itself to anything even remotely acidic. So I really have to keep my eye on that moss and make sure it's very well flushed. Yeah? Because that's not its natural environment. It would normally have an alkaline environment, not a slightly acidic environment. So I have to watch this one. In theory, it ought to be really difficult trying to grow that on a mount instead of on limestone rocks, and that is Dendrobium linguelli, 2 L's at the end. No tag, but I've said these often enough now that I can probably manage most of them without a tag. Right, the only one that's left up here that's not a resting type is this one, which is Bullenium, I think it is. Bullenianum. I'll get there in a minute. This one decided that it didn't like going upside down. It seemed to say to me, you'd have preferred to stay upright. Some do that. Some of them take to it naturally and some don't. But this one would not stand up in the pot, so it got mounted. So it still looks upside down. But it's aborted one new growth, but then pushed on 2 more. And what it has done is started a new root system in under that mount, so the new root system's coming on quite nicely now. Thank goodness, because it didn't have a very good root system. Now this one, you all remember what Hibiki looked like, and it had these very tight clusters of blooms hanging off very close to the cane. And they were purple, they were gorgeous. Now imagine that in fiery red orange with yellow stripes, because that's what that one looks like. One day maybe. Really looking forward to that if it ever does. Right, we're now up into the resting types, and while I'm looking at these I will be looking to see if they need a drink. So getting them down again. Now this is Findlayanum, has the very, very peculiar shaped pseudobulbs with quite a bulb almost individually at each leaf node. Nonetheless, it still flowers in the same manner. It blooms in the area opposite the leaf. Yeah. The new growths on here are the one I've got in my hand, this one below it, this one over here, and the one below that. So it looks like, I think there were 4 good new growths. The growths from the previous year have still got leaves on, although some of them are now starting to drop. They're starting to yellow and they'll come off soon. It did bloom in places on the previous year's growth, but it didn't bloom in all the places. So those 2-year-old canes are still capable of blooming, as are last year's growths. If it can push out blooms in all of those places, boy is that going to be a show. So that's that one, Findlayanum, running out of places to stick things. I've only got a couple more to get down now, and then I can shut the camera off and get on with the rest of the stuff. I'm not going to water these now, I'll water them before I put them back up. But at least I only get them down once. Now this is Dendrobium aphyllum. This came from Alberto as a kiki. This is the kiki, this bit. And that bloomed, and that really did surprise me. Only managed to get 1 new growth, and not, actually, yeah, it's about the same length as the what was the kiki, but it has produced some nice roots during last year's growing season. The kiki bloomed in, I would suggest, virtually every place it was capable of blooming, so there probably won't be any more on that cane. This is the cane that will bloom, and just looking closely, I think the nubbins are just starting now. Yeah, I doubt if you'll be able to see them because they really are tiny at the moment, but if you look right next to my finger, there, then I'll move my finger away, that's what they look like when they just start. Now in my book, that's not the time to bring it out of its rest just because it's got some nubbins. That's far too early. What I always think of is that those nubbins will turn into a spike, and it will look like a spike, a spiky thing sticking out. There won't be any buds on it, and then it'll start to split, and you'll start to see the bits of the spike that are going to have the buds on. Now, you might only get 1 bud on each of those, but normally you'd get 2 or 3. And as soon as you can see those buds, that's the time to start putting a bit of water in, and then as the buds start to swell, you can start introducing some feed. Because if you don't, those buds and blooms will take everything out of that cane and leave nothing. So that's my idea. And that might not be exactly how it grows in the wild, but that's how it grows here. So that's that, and that's the logic behind it. I don't ever say this is what I do, just copy me. I always say why. We're definitely running out of places to put stuff now. I've only got a couple more, and then I shall stop filming. Oh, another biggie. This one's heavy as well. There's an awful lot of bush on this one. And this is Friedrichsianum. And all I can say about this is, boy, did this grow well last year. This is all new growth here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and a little one. 8 or 9 new growths on there. But what they do is mask the old part of the plant. And the old part of the plant is this bit. And if you look at that, it's absolutely smothered in spikes. That was its first proper blooming ever since I got it last year. And it was good. Each one of these spiny little bits here had 2 or 3 blooms on, times that number of bits. Yeah. So most of these old canes, I would say, aren't going to bloom again. But in amongst these old canes are a couple that didn't bloom. They might. Never give up. You know, once they look like this, once they look like that, they come off in your hand, Your Honour. Yeah, they've had it for obvious reasons. That one certainly has. But yeah, once they're completely leafless and they've got their spikes everywhere you think it's possible of spiking, with that amount of growth on there, those type of old canes are serving no purpose whatsoever apart from making the place look untidy. So they can come off. Okay, so that's that one. That grew incredibly well last year. I hope it blooms to match its growth this year. That will be good. Right, 3 more to go. Ooh. Oh, these are difficult because the long canes knock everything over if you're not careful. I have to twist them as I go. Right, this is my anosmum, and most of what you see is not my plant. That's what was on it when I got it, which is these older, darker coloured canes. They didn't bloom last year, and I don't think they ever will now. They're just support canes. They're not really serving a purpose here. But we did get blooms on this one last year, just on the last third, just that bit down there. Yeah? So that was quite good. I was quite pleased. I hadn't had it long, and it then pushed out this nice long cane, which has still got a few leaves hanging on down there. So deciduous soon, but not quite yet. And it did push out this little stumpy one. I'm not quite sure what that one was all about, but it just didn't grow very well. But this one did. And if I can get that anywhere near the camera, I did say that this cane bloomed from, well, it bloomed in the last third. Last year's growing season's cane, this year's blooms, the nubbins start up here. And they go all the way down to the end of the cane. I think that's going to be quite a good show. So the length of the cane that's going to bloom is a lot longer. The fact that I now know it's capable of blooming much near the top of the cane than I thought, that might mean that this cane may push some blooms up farther back, because it didn't do it last time. Yeah? Just because it's got an annual season doesn't mean to say it only gets one go, if you see what I mean. There are quite a few dendrobiums that will bloom on part of a cane and have another go the following year. So that's an osman. Smells of squashed raspberries. No messing, no arguing about that. It smells of squashed raspberries. I'll argue that till the cows come home. And it's gorgeous. Quite strong. It'll fill this room on a bright day. But they don't last long. Blooms don't last long. And this one is, I hope it's got a primulinum, this one. This doesn't get too much bigger than this, quite honestly. And this one blooms a little later. It doesn't bloom right at the beginning of the deciduous type blooming ones. I'm just scanning this one to see. The trouble is with this one, I've forgotten which are this year's and last year. last year's and the year before's growths. Oh, we'll have to wait for them to bloom, won't we? But it did bloom last year. And it doesn't look like it bloomed on that cane because there's no stumpy bits. And maybe that's one of last year's growths. I can't remember. Anyway, we'll wait and see. But this one's still got a few leaves to drop, but you can see they're not going to be around much longer. So probably by the end of next month, I would say at the latest, that will be totally leafless. And by then, we should start seeing some new growths and or some buds. Some of these types of dendrobiums push their new growths up before the buds. Others totally bloom and the blooms drop before the new growths start, like some cattleyas do. But it's plant by plant basis, you can't set a rule really. So this Dendrobium aphyllum, lovely blooms on that, very delicate blooms on that one. That leaves one. Oh, this is a biggie. I have to grab all the canes together and squash them and hold them in one hand and lift the mount down like that. With the canes grabbed hold of, which soon I'm going to have to go a bit more careful doing because the buds are going to be coming out soon and I'll start knocking them off. This is Dendrobium nesta, which is an anosmum cross. Still got a few leaves to drop, not completely gone yet. Have we got buds showing? We should have by now, I'd have thought. The anosmum's got the nubbins. Let me see. They're there, but they're really in their infancy. Let me see if I can get one near the camera. They're not so easy. The cane I've actually got in my hand, that's what the nubbins look like at this stage. There. And there. Yeah? So they just look like a little bump at the moment. But if you touch them gently, don't ever bash things around, especially in the early bud stage. You can feel there's something hard there, and it's all, and they're all in the right places. So what else would they be? Don't say kikis. Mine don't do that, or not this sort anyway. Okay, so now I can water those and put them back. The only other one I was asked about, which I had to wait till last because it's right at the back and it's not as big, is the Jenkins CI. Somebody said, has that dropped all its leaves? And the simple answer is no, but it is losing some. And these leaves are probably 3 years old. And this plant, unfortunately, is going to have to come off the mount. I made that decision last time I looked at it. So there's a dead leaf in there, it won't come out. Come out, you little tyke. Gotcha. So those are just the old ones. It saves them falling on any other plants. That's why I like to take them off. Now the reason this has got to come off the mount should be reasonably obvious. This is my plant that I bought. This little bit here. That's all I bought, was that bit. It's totally shriveled. I could probably just pull some of these bulbs off. They're so far gone. They're loose. They would just twist off. I won't do it now. But so that part of the plant's had it. But it's grown up there, it's grown out there, it's grown out towards us, and boy has it grown down there. Well, where's the next place it's going to grow? Is up the back. And if it does that, it's going to be blooming both sides of the mount. So you're only going to see half the blooms at once. So I'm going to have to take that off the mount, bull by the horns and everything. This section here, I don't know whether you'll be able to see in underneath there, but that section of the plant raised itself up on its roots. Yeah, so there's air gaps in there, quite a few. And this bit down the bottom, that's come round the bottom of the mount, is where most of the good roots are, and they're well attached. And that's not going to come off easy. That's going to be hard work. But nonetheless, it needs to come off. And what I will probably do is wait until it's bloomed, because the new growths mature quite quickly on this. I don't have to worry about setting the plant back too much. Once it starts growing, it grows like mad. But what I'll have is a piece of plant from there, I'll have a piece of plant from here, and hopefully one big piece here, which I can straighten up, which I can't do now because it's absolutely attached. So there may be 3 or 4 pieces there, and is that going to be 3 or 4 pieces on separate mounts? Is it hell? It'll all get put back together, and I know this might sound odd, but the oldest part of the plant, when it's cut off, the pieces can go back and be remounted and fill the gap again. Yeah? Because the new growths are not always going to come out of the growing tips. I've noticed they can just poke out of the middle of the plant every now and again. So I'll just push it all back together and make one nice new clump to grow on for another few years before I have to do it again. But yeah, it's outgrown its place. Now in the wild, that's exactly what it would do. It would just grow away from the oldest part of the plant, creep along the branch or go under it or over it, and the old part would just get left behind to just rot away along with its dead roots. And the plant would gradually move. Slowly but surely it would move along or round the branches, and all the new growths would push away from where the old bit is. So that's Dendrobium jenkinsii. You're not going to come off, are you? No. Almost growing too well, but I'd like to see that bloom before I do anything else with it. And there's no reason why it shouldn't. It's had its rest. It bloomed last spring. Actually got a first at one of the Orchid Societies. It was so good. So I see no reason why it shouldn't do it again. But I think the blooms might come out in some odd places this time, like straight down from the bottom of the plant, because that's where a lot of the new growth is. Okay, so that's the most of the resting dendrobiums. I'm not getting senilli down. I know everybody likes to see that one, but it's a project plant. It'll come for review quite quickly. So this video replaces what was the live broadcast. Don't think I'm going to make a habit of it, because as I've said before, I'm not too keen on being in my videos. With me it's all about the plants. I don't mind popping up in one now and again, and because this was supposed to be a live broadcast, that's the only reason I'm in it today. Otherwise I'd have been filming the hanging plants like I usually do. But it makes a change, doesn't it? It's something a bit different. You know, have the plants in their entirety so that you can see the whole lot rather than the camera just sliding down and coming back up again. So that's that one done. The battery managed to last. It'll take me a while to process this video and get it posted, so it's actually quite early in the day at the moment. It's probably going to be late afternoon before it gets posted, but you don't need to know that. It'll just appear, won't it? And you'll watch it as and when you get a chance, hopefully. And I'll see you next time. Thanks for dropping by.